All right, Les, thank you so much. Thank you all for welcoming me into your space here today. It's so exciting to see so much collaboration happening on behalf of justice-involved folks in Hawaii. I think there's a lot of other states that could learn from this consortium and what y'all have put together here. Um, like I said, I'm Caitlin. I'm a campaign strategist with the Clean Slate Initiative. I'm based out of Oakland, California. And I have been in the field of justice reform for over 20 years now, mostly wearing a hat as an organizer and advocate. Worked with many coalitions and campaigns in multiple states over the years, and have been at the Clean Slate Initiative now for 2.5 years. And in our brief time today, I wanted to run you through a relatively short presentation. I'm going to share my screen in a moment and run you through some slides, and then open up for some brainstorming and discussion among this group. And I hope that folks will come off mute and participate to really help point us in the right direction for our work that's coming up in Hawaii. Um, so let me pull up the presentation here. All right, slideshow. All right, can folks see my screen? I see one nod, so I'm gonna go with it. It's from Kristen. Yep. Okay, great. Um, all right, so this is what I'm proposing as our agenda for today. I'm going to introduce you to the Clean Slate Initiative, the organization that I work for, and Clean Slate policy generally. So, what is a Clean Slate policy? We're going to talk a little bit about the national landscape and some good national research that we have about impact. Then I want us to brainstorm and hear from you what barriers, the question here should be what barriers are records creating in Hawaii from your experience on the ground there? We'll talk about Clean Slate in Hawaii and ways we might be able to support your state, and then we'll get into a brainstorm and some Q&A. And I aim to get all of that done in the next 25 minutes or so. So let's go. All right. Okay, so the Clean Slate Initiative is a national bipartisan nonprofit organization. We have staff all across the country, and we are working in states across the country and in Congress to pass and implement laws that automate record sealing for people with eligible records who've completed their sentence and refrained crime-free. Now, I want to make a note here that in most states that we work in, folks use the terminology of sealing. It's actually not the right word to use in Hawaii. And so I just wanted to say that you'll see the word seal throughout here, but in Hawaii we'll use a different term. Um, so 13 states have passed Clean Slate, and we just got our 13th. It was Illinois. I was on that campaign. Very exciting win that I'm happy to share more about. But that campaign was led entirely by people directly impacted by conviction records, who ran an organizing strategy in Illinois. Really exciting to see that win. So they just passed about a month ago, and they are headed into their implementation phase. 13 states mean that about 18 million people now in the United States are eligible for full or partial record sealing. It's a big impact. And we have kind of a three-pronged strategy at CSI. We advocate for Clean Slate and we work with partners in states to advocate for Clean Slate. We implement Clean Slate legislation and then we redefine the narrative around people with records. And I heard some of this coming up in the conversation that you all were having just now about goals, which is like, redefining the narrative about how people talk about people with records or convictions, what the narrative is, how to be more humanizing, things along those lines. So we have a big project that's related to that. All right. This is just an overview of the states that have passed, and Illinois is not lit up yet, but it will be soon. I just updated the slide earlier today. So these are some examples of some of the states that have passed Clean Slate. And you have Washington, D.C. in there as well. Okay, so what is a clean slate law? A clean slate law requires a state-initiated process, means the government starts it, to limit access to non-conviction arrest records and certain conviction records, depending on the state, for individuals who've completed their sentences and remain crime-free for a specified period of time. So to be a clean slate state, you have to limit access to both non-convictions and certain convictions and make that process a state-initiated automated process that in general doesn't involve like moving boxes of papers or redacting something with a Sharpie or something like that. It doesn't involve manual review of individual records. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the national landscape. So Clean Slate actually has bipartisan support across the country. So the majority of the Clean Slate bills that we have seen passed have had both Republican and Democratic co-sponsors. In the recent Illinois bill, you have similar to Hawaii, you have a blue trifecta in Illinois. And so we didn't have a Republican co-sponsor there, but we did have Republican folks vote in favor of the legislation, which was exciting. And we are actively working in over half the country and in Congress. So my active campaigns are Massachusetts, Illinois, and I'll be supporting Hawaii because I got lucky enough to be assigned to Hawaii. All right. So I want to open it up here for a moment and then I'll restart my share. But I want to be able to see folks and have people come off mute if possible or put it in the chat if that's easier for you. What are some barriers that records are creating in Hawaii that you see from your work?
Access to housing.
Barriers to housing, right? Because landlords are checking those background checks, right?
They're checking them and they don't always understand. So, a good example, I tell this story a lot, but it was just the most disheartening one we had. We had a young lady on Oahu who had a long history of domestic violence. She was the
Mm,
victim, not the perpetrator, but the landlords just pull up eCourt Kakua and see the list, right? And that's as far as they look. They don't look any deeper to and to the credit of the landlords, I think they often just don't understand what those things mean. um and even when I was able to finally get one to entertain having the conversation, his stance was, really, I just don't want to invite that kind of trouble. Clearly she has a troubled history. If I move her in here, it's possible this man will come to the site as well. So we see
yep,
that quite a bit. You know, yeah, I would say the eCourt Kikua site damages our housing chances for a lot of individuals, even those that don't have convictions, but just have had those past charges.
right.
And as
Yeah,
such, it's all documented.
absolutely. Thank you so much. So barriers to housing is a huge one. What other kind of barriers are records creating in Hawaii? I saw Ola come off mute.
Hi. So some of our clients, when they're in the process of finding employment, they get hired. And then a couple of weeks down the line, maybe even a month down the line, their employer tells them that their offer is rescinded because of the background check.
Yep.
And that's happened multiple times for some of our clients.
Yeah, barriers to employment, rescinding those offers. Absolutely. Anything else besides housing and employment?
I've had a situation where I've been unable to obtain a passport or a visa for travel and have been
Yeah,
asked for additional information as far as state reports, FBI reports, additional fingerprinting, and personal narratives regarding my case. And still not been cleared. It's been 60 days and have not been cleared yet for a travel visa.
yeah, absolutely. That's another key barrier. So I want to, I'm going to share my screen once more. Click slideshow. Um, let me see. Okay, there we go. So these are what we know about the barriers. So exactly as y'all said, 94% of employers and 90% of landlords conduct background checks. Having an arrest or conviction record reduces job interview callbacks by 50%, regardless of qualifications or the nature of experience of the offense. Something to the tune of $80 billion are lost from the US GDP every year due to shutting people with records out of the workforce. And the total lost earnings for Americans impacted by conviction or incarceration, $372 billion. Okay. But there's good news. In 13 states, this is beginning to change, and we hope Hawaii is coming soon behind. Um, we did some national research and learned that automated record relief is having some clear economic impacts and other impacts. So 42% of people reported improvement in work, employment, personal finance, or public assistance. 35% report improvement in personal and family relationships. Sometimes schools will do background checks on parents before letting them come to their kids' field trips, that kind of thing. So that's been a big barrier. 34% report improvement in health, mental health, or self-esteem. That really gets to the stigma associated with having a record. 28% are getting more involved in their community. 24% are reporting an improvement in housing, and 22% are reporting an improvement in education. So we see real impact from Clean Slate in these states. So we get some questions about, is Clean Slate a safe policy? Is it good for public safety? And I want to share some research that indicates that yes, it is good for public safety. So research out of Michigan, which is a clean slate state, shows that people with expunged or sealed records are less likely to recidivate after 5 years than the general public. In California, only 2% of people who receive record relief are expected to be convicted of a new offense within 5 years. There's research that says around 4 to 7 years without criminal activity, most people with records pose no more threat to public safety than the general population. All right. Um, Limiting access to records help people earn a second chance by removing these barriers, and that's good for the economy, that's good for communities, that's good for public safety. What's bad for public safety is making it impossible for people to get safe housing or meaningful work. In Michigan, we saw some significant increases in wages for people with an expungement within just 1 year. Clean Slate can reduce the administrative burden on courts and prosecutors, freeing up resources, allowing prosecutors to focus on more serious crimes that are actually impacting public safety. So, what does Clean Slate in Hawaii look like? And that's really a question for you all to answer. So, as you may know, there is currently a Clean Slate task force. A bill was passed a couple years ago that established a task force to discuss how you could implement a Clean Slate policy in Hawaii. And that task force is taking on the task of recommending to the legislature what a policy would look like. And they're making a lot of tailored decisions. And so they are about a year into their time as a task force. And next year, this time, they'll be making legislative recommendations. So there's still a lot of time to influence this task force. So some of the questions the task force is considering is who is eligible for records relief, right? Like which convictions, which non-convictions, which records should be included, who is eligible. What are waiting periods? So how long after a crime, after someone serves time for their crime, would someone need to wait to be eligible for expungement? And who can see or view these records? So, for example, in most states, law enforcement and prosecution retain access to those records. Courts also, corrections, etc. And then you have things like child welfare agencies, certain employers around vulnerable populations, licensing bodies, etc. So there's a lot of flexibility, and this is a highly customizable policy. So really, folks in Hawaii can craft this and tailor this to the unique needs of Hawaii and put out a policy which works well for you all. So Clean Slate helps in several ways when we invest in a state. So we are really committed to working with local partners, which is why I'm glad that I got invited to share with you all today. We had a great presentation with J League a couple of months ago. We presented to the task force and we also presented to the House Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. We can help in building out policy, talking about implementation. We can talk about technical readiness for a system to get up and running, all kinds of stuff like that. So I want to ask two questions to the group. And I'm going to stop my share here and come back. I want to ask, you all really represent a broad range of actors. You have people inside the government, in prosecution, Department of Labor, it sounds like Department of Health, workforce development. You have people in community colleges, a whole range of folks involved here. And I'm curious if you can brainstorm with me a little bit about what you think it might take to win a clean slate policy, legislation for clean slate in Hawaii in the coming years. What would you do? What would your strategy be? I realize that's a big question, but there it is.
I know we talked about it a lot at J League. But again, like I just really think it's all about like the education and the language around it. Like, um, like even I think I discussed it with you last time, like even for our prosecutors, like I can imagine them being like, well, are we gonna have access? It's like just making sure that those things are really clear, like even if you're just repeating it a lot. Um, and I think like bringing the information to the community. So whether that's like going to HOA meetings or schools or the colleges, but like just really hammering in the stats and how it's being customized by our task force. Because I think the biggest thing is people get scared that um, like sex offenders or domestic violence perpetrators or um, certain perpetrators wouldn't have their background anymore, like stalking or, this more serious crimes. And I think that, again, that education piece, that it's going to be tailored, it's going to be specific, it's going to meet the needs of our county, our state, not like a blanket proposal. Because, yeah, according to our surveys and stuff, a lot of folks are really like punishment and record keeping oriented and wanting to know backgrounds. So just a lot of education.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. What else y'all got?
Um, Thank you, Caitlin, for your presentation and your questions. Um, for myself, and we've discussed this as well during our daily meetings and such, that bringing forth the voices of individuals, justice involved individuals, and sharing their success and um, sharing their truth, their testimony, having them in the forefront, and being a part of the initiative is super important. And yes, and I joined the expungement task force in October, just 2 months ago. So I've only attended two meetings, and they've already come up with their second report. And so, um, I've read it, I've listened, and for me, I have a lot to catch up on um, with the task force, and it includes reaching out to them individually if I must. But just suiting up and showing up as a lived experience individual, I think is needed. So, like also that what Amanda shared, bringing awareness, bringing it to our community, being transparent, and sharing as much as we can as individuals and organizations and partners.
Thank you, Michelle. Moses, were you going to come in?
Yeah, I'd also say like try and focus on the eligibility criteria of clean slate, making sure the public understands that it's not every single case is going to be like that. Not everything's going to be just thrown out just for, the understanding of public safety. Some people may be opposed of it because, oh, they're going to get rid of this on top of his record or this, I would say.
Yeah, I think we have to drive home the point that the records are not being burned in a backyard. They're being retained by law
Mhm.
enforcement. And so, but trying to figure out what's the right messaging for that that resonates with the public. Do you know what I mean? That like there is a secure system, they will be kept so law enforcement can continue to view them, use them for a future prosecution should another crime happen. All this stuff is like a kind of messaging puzzle to me that I haven't quite figured out.
Mm.
All right, terrific. This is all really helpful strategy question. So the status of so the way Clean Slate Initiative works is we partner with community organizations who are local to the states where we're running campaigns. Those groups form a steering committee and a coalition, and they run a campaign. We are also a funder at CSI, and so we resource some of those organizations to run a campaign. And um, that campaign figures out what the right strategy is. You would be working with me closely on strategy, be taking lessons from other states, but also Hawaii is a unique place. And so, what is the most appropriate strategy for to move legislators and to educate the public in Hawaii? Um, and I'm excited to report that we got approval to launch a campaign in Hawaii starting this spring for Clean Slate. And similar to what you all have been talking about, we're actually not starting with a legislative campaign. We're starting with a public education and awareness campaign because it's what we've learned from talking to many people now in Hawaii is that there's a bit of a tough on crime sentiment in the state among the populace. Certainly not everybody, but there is some of that. And so the soil needs to be tilled a bit to create more public support and understanding for what record clearance is and how it supports public safety. And then we would look down the line, maybe 2027 for a legislative campaign. Um, so I just got approval to, I feel very lucky for this. I just got approval to fly out to Oahu at the end of January to hold a planning retreat where basically several organizations will come together and will create a campaign plan for what a public education and awareness campaign could look like in the state. And I'm happy to keep you all in the loop on that. But my next question and curiosity is what role would the consortium like to play, or would individuals of the consortium like to play in a clean slate campaign moving forward?
I can say from, hi Caitlin, nice to meet you. I'm Efren. I am in the systems change project manager at Partners in Care. We're the continuing move care for Oahu. So we're one of the folks that Les said is a part of that statewide justice hui that's kind of a statewide version of this. And we are doing a lot of work with DCR and the justice system and actually submitting a research proposal with DCR and UH around houseless folks within the system. But I think the work that you do aligns well with us. So I think I'll probably reach out to Les and get a meeting scheduled, but we would also be happy to host this retreat if needed and can help point you in directions and bring in people if you need.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I thought I saw someone else come off mute to respond to the curiosity of what role you all might like to play. Is this something you'd be interested in working on? There's so many competing priorities right now, especially with the current federal administration. It's hard to prioritize a new policy issue, so just want to reflect that I'm well aware of that. We have folks working on, ICE raids, cuts to health insurance, like, there's just it's a crisis, it's a poly crisis right now. And so getting to figure out which organizations does this really fit with their mission. And then, working with them in that way. And I think one possibility, given a invitation or a blessing, I'd be happy to keep this body updated on what things are looking like with Clean Slate. It looks like we're certainly going to be working with J League closely on Clean Slate, which I'm really excited about. And we're working on a few other partners to form a steering committee. But just wanted to come here and introduce myself, share a little bit about the policy, and say that if anyone here is interested in collaborating, has tips for us on how to work well and partner well in Hawaii, just wide open to feedback and your ideas. Um, and I'll be really glad to come out and hopefully meet some of you all at the end of January. I'm going to put my email in the chat. And if folks want to be in touch with me directly, feel free to shoot over an email. Thanks for the opportunity any questions before I close out? Okay. Thanks for the opportunity to present, y'all. I really appreciate you and your work.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. That was a great presentation. Very informative, back and forth questions and answers, and hope you got some great ideas too. So yes, you have your contact information, yeah, in the chat. Anybody needs to get in touch with you, that they can look there and get your information. Also, you can contact me if you need to get information, and contact Caitlin. So thanks again for the great presentation, and thank you all for meeting. Before I adjourn, just want to say, again, hoping everybody has a safe and happy holiday season. Looking forward to right around the corner. I don't know how fast the years seem to go by so quickly. Again, the consortium is now 21 years old, going looking at 22 years old. So it's been great. So thank you all for all of your commitment, your dedication, your time, and your caring. Really appreciate all of the work that you all do. I'm going to leave the room open, so if anybody wants to stay and just talk star a little bit, I'm going to leave it over for about 10 more minutes after we adjourn. So thanks again, everybody. See you all soon. Mahalo.
Mahalo.